Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym. Aliya Whiteley is the author of 7 books of speculative fiction, including the Arthur C. Clarke Award shortlisted Skyward and The Loosening Skin, and also The Beauty, which was shortlisted for both the Shirley Jackson Award and the Otherwise Award. A 10th anniversary edition of The Beauty was published in 2024. Aliya has written over 100 published short stories that have appeared in magazines, including The Dark, McSweeney's Internet Tendency and The Guardian, as well as in anthologies such as Unsung Stories 2084 and Lonely Planets Better Than Fiction. Her non-fiction includes The Secret Life of Fungi, a look at how fungi are a permanent presence in her life. She also writes a regular non-fiction column on sci-fi and fantasy matters for Interzone magazine. Aliya Whiteley.
Hello.
Welcome to the Writer's Gym.
Thank you very much for inviting me along. Yeah.
It's
really
always such a pleasure. Remember meeting you when we were both in Great British Horror in, don't even know, 2021-ish?
Is it really? Wow.
Or 2020. It was that sort of wobbly time period where a lot of things happened in and around lockdown.
Yeah.
And I was interviewing for Women in Horror Week and things like that, and I'd really just discovered that I was a horror writer. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but one of the happiest things that ever happened to me was realising how broad a church, how stretchy a term it is, and just the fascination of the weird and unique ways of looking at things. And I think what I've just always admired so much about you is how wonderfully curious you are. I think for a lot of the people I work with, there's been a great hang up around what if it's too weird, but also what if it's too boring, and what if it's too, and I'm not saying there's anyone who doesn't feel that, but I think being able to be good-humoured about things and appreciate the strangeness in them is what I look for in writers.
Yeah.
And yeah. I do feel that is so you.
Thank you. I'd like to think that's me. I'm completely curious and always willing to kind of throw myself at the front line of it and just see what happens. I don't think I would have half as much fun as I do without it. So it's kind of become, a big part of what I do. Certainly, if an idea occurs to me, then I write it and then worry about what it means or whether I shouldn't later, I guess. So, yeah.
I was thinking about it a lot because I saw on your website that the subheading writing novels, short stories and articles, full stop, usually strange ones.
Yes, this is true.
And I loved that as branding, as almost mission statement.
Well, weird has become kind of a defined thing, almost like weird fiction started to almost have a capital U as a thing. And sometimes I'm definitely writing that. But sometimes within the kind of strictures people apply to that now, I feel like maybe strange is a better word for it. So nobody's kind of defined strange fiction yet. So I'm still free and clear to do whatever I like in that definition. So I tend to call it strange rather than weird. But honestly, I think, people put the genres on later almost, and that's fine. But I don't tend to think of it in those terms at the point of writing it as much as possible.
My favourite of yours probably is I adored The Secret Life of Fungi. And
thank you.
Well, thank you. The reason I wanted to start with that is the balance of talking about our subject matter and our love for our subject matter and bringing our own story into it. I know from working with memoir writers that there is a lot of reluctance around how much to bring oneself in and how much is maybe overshadowing. But if you don't do it, you're sort of not telling the whole story because you're there in the first place. And I remember you mentioning that was a question for you as well. What was that like?
It was a big stretch to kind of write that book. I mean, I'm not an expert on fungi at all, but I wanted to write something about my fascination with them. And I did like a huge amount of research and was trying to put across things in a very dry academic kind of way. And then I just realized that was totally wrong for the project, really, and I couldn't do that. So instead, I wrote this very short, quite personal book about how I just found fungi everywhere throughout my life. And it made so much more sense to me in that way, giving yourself an excuse to be excited about things that have happened to you and put that across is quite freeing. So I tried to approach it from that angle and you're not sort of unfilteredly just giving everything over to it. You know, there are certain moments that you're picking and there are moments that certainly in the book, I'm like, this is what I'm about to say is not exactly true, but it's a representation of how that felt to me. And I think that's fair to kind of, use your own experiences and translate them or mutate them to suit what you're writing about. Yeah, it was a really fun project to do. Once I decided that I didn't have to, live up to it in a certain way or be academic about it particularly.
And that's something that is so important, not just for memoirists, but maybe particularly for memoirists, finding that freedom, how much of yourself you put in, how much of it's not about expert mindset, it's about communicating the passion and what the story is for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's there's ideas about experts and who's allowed to write things, which aren't always very helpful. So yeah, it's trying to think around that or get out of that sort of mindset.
That mindset, I'm jumping ahead a little, so I will do a bit of jumping around, but I think is something that we can all get in our own way so much in terms of, I'm not allowed to say that, or I'm not enough of an expert to say that. And I'm wondering, did you have a sort of system or thought process for catching yourself doing that? Because it's not just with memoir, we do it to ourselves with all sorts of things, with articles, with fiction. Do you have a way that you talk to yourself about that, about noticing if you are holding back or not letting yourself be I don't want to say expert because it's beginner mindset, isn't it?
I think I've become really good at just ignoring that. I had some helpful advice once about, all the voices that are in your head and you're all on the bus together, essentially. And, the writer self is the one driving the bus. But I don't know about you, but I've certainly had a lot of weird bus experiences where some passenger start shouting or whatever. I used to travel to, this is a complete tangent. I used to travel to work every day on a bus, and every day a lovely guy would get on and sit there, but about halfway through, he really felt the need to stand up and start shouting, loudly. But it was fine. And I kind of almost think of it in that way. It's like the shouting doesn't mean catastrophe ahead. It just means, one of the passengers is shouting, but passengers are allowed to shout every now and again on my buses. That's okay. So, yeah.
And also,
I'm just going to let him go.
Yeah, also the going with that idea that the voices in all of our heads are on that same bus. They're all going to have those different stories, aren't they? They're all going to be different potential articles, different potential fiction, different potential everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole range of emotions and thoughts and processes, and there are the ones that are, they're trying to warn you all the time, but they're not driving the bus. So just kind of be aware of them, but I don't let it stop the process, particularly sort of first draft process where whatever comes out, and then you've got time later to worry about what should go in and shouldn't go in. It's a real splurge at first.
I never want to use the word favourite, because it is like favourite children or dogs or cats, in that even if we have them, we don't want to know that we have them. But are there voices or are there things that were particularly either fun to write or rewarding to write?
They're all different, as you say. From the process of coming out the other end, I have favourites now, like once I emerge from the process. But the process of writing is very different. I wrote a novel called Greensmith, and I hated every second of writing it, but I knew I had to get it out of my head before I could move on. And every day it was kind of, I hate this book. I hate it. But I wrote it, and now I look back on it and I can see none of that kind of awful struggle. It's just kind of, and that's fine. And then other books were just so easy to write, and I don't feel sort of strongly about them afterwards. So I think maybe that process affects how you feel about it later, but it's all a bit murky. I haven't sort of worked out. Secret Life of Fungi, I'm fond of because I got the commission to write that just at the beginning of the first lockdown, and I'd gone to the library and taken out this huge stack of books, and then the library said, well, we're just shut for as long as possible. You can just keep all those books, no fines. We don't know what's happening. So I had this huge stack of books for months. It worked out perfect. And then I just immersed myself in all of that and really, really enjoyed there being not much else to think about. So I just lost myself in that sort of world.
And you were their lockdown guardian.
Yeah, I was. So yeah, it's all different times and feelings and whatever. But I very secretly, I really love The Arrival of Missives. I think is probably my favourite in terms of how the experience of writing went and me feeling satisfied with how the book came out. Yeah, probably.
Probably that's the favourite.
Don't
tell the others. It would be great to talk about City of All Seasons, both as itself and also because one of the things that probably up-and-coming writers and new writers and nervous writers could really do with hearing is that there are opportunities in crises.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at a few times where I've changed publishers. Like quite early on, I wrote crime, and I wrote that with Macmillan. So my first couple of books were published with Macmillan, and then sales weren't what they wanted to be, and I wanted to change direction, and things weren't really right. But that moment of sort of panic of, oh my God, I don't have a book deal, I don't have a publisher anymore, I don't have an agent anymore, was a difficult time. But I'd already kind of thought to myself, well, I didn't really want to write crime forever anyway, and it felt quite sort of straitjacketed at the time. So I just started to write short fiction, the kind that I write now, where I just let whatever genre, however strange it is, just let it be what it is. And then started sending that out to sort of small presses. And actually, the first sort of publisher who I ended up back with after that was Unsung Stories, which was absolutely tiny. It was just as George Sanderson was just starting to put that together. He was the editor in charge. And it all sort of grew from there. But then obviously, later on, Unsung had sort of run its course, and then I moved to Titan, and then from Titan to Solaris. And each time you kind of feel like, oh no, I don't know if this is going to affect what I do, but I've been really lucky. It doesn't really, I'm kind of told to still go and do what I do, and I do it. But yes, with City of All Seasons, so that's a book that I've written with Oliver Langmead. And it came to trying to find a home for that. And Ollie's still with Titan, although I'm with Solaris now. So Titan bought the rights for it, and it's really nice to be back, sort of working with Titan again. But yeah, there's like the Titan hat and the Solaris hat, and then I still try and publish with small presses as well. So I've got stuff coming up with Newcom Press and Calc Press, and it's lovely to have a lot of different strings to your bow and not feel like I don't want to say one's better than the other, because they're not. They're all brilliant and they all do different things incredibly well. So it's lovely to have a lot of outlets. Yeah, that's how I try and approach it.
In terms of that approach and making that happen, I realise every story and every book is different, but in terms of doing the writing and then doing the communication, the writing about the writing, the reaching out to different publishers or journals and magazines, is there anything you'd say to people who are just getting their head around that, how you approach what you do?
I mean, as you say, it's different for every project, but I tend to just say the bare minimum almost. So when I submit to places, I'm usually just polite and kind of, here's a thing I've written, and give like a very bare description of it. I'm useless at that side of things anyway, so less is really better.
You don't look useless at it from here.
I can't sort of describe it. It sounds terrible whenever I describe it. It's about sentient shrooms, and everybody goes, no. you kind of have to be a bit more sort of, it's strange and lyrical and dark and whatever, those sort of bigger umbrella terms of it. Yeah, that's all I really do. I think I'm lucky that I've been doing this for long enough now that I've built relationships where you can approach people and they kind of know how you work in a way. So yeah,
also it's the knowing what they're looking for, because I guess when you're really sort of really beginning, the thing that we need to say to them or imply to them in the letter is why we're choosing them. We haven't just shut our eyes and stuck our finger in the writer's and artist yearbook. There's a reason.
Yes. Dear Sir, Madam. Yeah. I love what you do, whatever that is. Please will you? Yeah. So, I try and make sure I use somebody's name, and that if I've loved something that they've published, then I try to, put that, because you want to work with people who publish things that you really love anyway. So that's always a good place to start, right? Be like, I've just read so and so. I thought that was amazing, and I thought maybe that meant that you would be interested in something I've written.
Yeah. And that actually comes back, I don't know if it feels like this for you, but it comes back to the embracing of whether we call it weird or peculiar, or whether it is literally weird fiction, or whether it is, I adored that, writing novels, short stories and articles, usually strange ones, embracing the fundamental of that will go off in strange directions. And that appreciation does, for me, link with the enthusiasm that we need to get across in those letters or those emails, saying this is why I love what you do, what I'm enthusiastic about, what I think we'll have in common, and not being afraid to be enthusiastic, I think.
Yeah, I think that's such an underrated quality, like in the entire of life, not just I think growing up in the 90s, everything was like, oh, don't show any enthusiasm for anything ever. That's just so not cool. So I've really embraced it as I've got older and kind of thought, no, I'm really into this. And it's great to be able to say to other writers now, or whatever, who've had an impact on you, I really love what you do. Thank you for doing that. And I think it's important to also say it to editors and publishers, and to look for people that you want to work with who you do feel really enthusiastic about.
Was there a time or a moment where you found that the voices got comfortable with the idea of, I am an author, I am successful at this is happening? Or do you sort of feel, do you think we all sort of take with us the idea that somebody else is a proper writer and I'm just this, and things like that?
Yeah, I don't have any sort of confidence about it whatsoever still. And I think every project that you start feels like, the beginning all over again. But I like that idea of beginner's mind. Like, I think it might be a different book if I felt really confident, or that I felt I could easily write something. It wouldn't turn out properly anyway. So that feeling of being some way an amateur, starting over with a project that you can't define almost, is a big part of what I do. But yeah, even when you sort of go into bookshops and it's one of your books is there or whatever, you just feel really weird about it. Like, that's so strange.
Has that happened? Paint that picture for me. When has that happened to you?
So, my local Waterstones, every now and again I've written something and it's on the shelf or whatever, and I kind of have this moment of, I always do this really embarrassing thing if I have my daughter with me, where I shuffle up to her with, like, holding the book, and I'm like, I wrote this one. She's like, yes. But I'm almost easier in relationship with it, with books where I've said something nice about it, and it's really lovely when somebody then prints it like on the front. That's amazing. And then it's me. They've quoted me on the, so I don't know what that's about at all. Whether it's just, that's almost like more like being a proper writer. If somebody's quoted you saying something about it, it's such a ridiculous mindset generally. But yeah, I don't. I like still thinking that I'm just in it for the fun, really, more than anything. So that's what I do.
And maybe there is something in the fun of it, the unpredictability of it. Maybe there is something in that maybe at some level we want to hang on to the other people are a real one. I'm just pretending, I'm just making it up. Because we are.
It's freeing, isn't it? I mean, it's quite freeing to not be the adult in the room in the way. It's kind of, no, I'm just in it for the fun things I want to do. And I do think that's true. But I think you may be right that we all are on some level, just in it for the fun, aren't we?
I hope so. I really do. With the Writers' Gym, this is despite the fact that the vocabulary for me of writing and the weights, for example, the weights that I lift every morning, when I first picked those up, I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to lift that. Now I feel like I could spin it on my finger. Do not try this at home, people. But that is the sensation because I'm so used to it. It's got nothing to do with the weight. It's not necessarily even anything to do with me. It's just that when you do something over and over again, your brain and body go, hello, normal. And, that's what happens. I'm wondering, are there any writing equivalents of those for you, that maybe there are things that are normal now or exercises that work for you that have come into your life?
An exercise I've done through being a writer whenever I feel like I've gone off track or I've got no ideas is I do the keep a notebook by the bed. As soon as you wake up in the morning, just write a page. And it doesn't, before you check your phone, before you look at anything, it doesn't even have to be words that make sense. You're not looking for sentences. You're not looking for stories. You're not looking for dreams. You're not, you're literally just writing. And I find that so helpful to just be free of all the constraints. And then the weirdest, best ideas kind of just pop out of nowhere. And you've written some sentence that you think, that's the start of a story. It's going into something. But because I didn't think of it in those terms, the pressure's removed. So that really helps. That's what I've gone back to time and time again. But I'm a big believer in all sorts of exercises and routines that you put around writing that kind of weirdly it's a bit like scaffolding. It kind of takes the pressure off what it is you're trying to build. So something like working on 381, where every section of that book is 381 words long. Weirdly, that kind of removes a lot of pressure of what's happening in the novel because you've applied sort of weird constraints to it. Or exercises like, okay, so I have to put these 5 particular objects that I've just made up on the spot. They have to appear in this next short story somewhere. And then the narrative or the characters or all the other things that you would choose to worry about aren't there any longer because you're thinking about these 5 objects. And you have to do a lot of editing afterwards. And you might take out the objects, but you still got a story and something to work with. Things like that really take the pressure off the final product and allow you to just sort of play.
In terms of time and how that structure might apply to the writer as well as the writing, do you find there are times of day that you need to just guard against everybody else, that this is when the writing needs to happen? Or what's it like for you?
No, it's pretty good. I like those moments where you've not built yourself up to it and you think, I've suddenly got 20 minutes free. And I'm a longhand writer in the main, so I just grab a piece of paper and a pen and use those 20 minutes. I find it's better where I've not sort of done a lot of... If you kind of, you've got this stretch of 3 hours, like I'm gonna write my thing in 3 hours, then chances are for me, I'll spend 20 minutes writing and then 2 hours 40 looking at YouTube because I'm a bit rubbish at things like that. But I like writing in cafes. I do like that idea of you've got your stuff, you've got your coffee, you're just free of other constraints, so you do that.
This is one of my favourites as well, is the 10 minutes. And I think it does follow the same thing you were saying about the morning pages, that there's almost a this doesn't count level to it.
Yeah, almost like sort of just clearing your throat, or, it's not the big deal. This isn't the performance. But sometimes in those little gaps, the best things come to you.
I remember saying that about a few people who were so frustrated that they didn't have writing days, and that what people didn't understand was they simply didn't have the time, and getting people reacquainted with the 10 minutes that they do have, rather than waiting for perfection in any form. The perfectionism, procrastination, finding those tiny bursts, and those tiny bursts actually potentially being better than the empty day.
I do think that's true, and then once I get to the end of a project and you're in the final stages of sort of typing it up and getting it shaped, then those are the only times I think where I actually sort of take the phone off the hook, or, the equivalent of that, or close the door and say, I'm just doing this, and then sort of really work on it. But then, I don't know about you, but I find in those moments you really feel the passion to have it completely done. Then you kind of, this is the home stretch. It's almost like writing a novel at this huge marathon, and at the beginning you're just kind of, I've managed my 20 steps or whatever today, that's enough. And then in that final thing where you can finally see the finish line, then I get this real urge to. But I couldn't possibly ask for that urge at the beginning of the writing experience. There'd be no point because you're not near the home stretch. Just plot, just put in your hours, and eventually, then the end be in sight, and then you could really put some effort in.
There's a number of metaphors, all of them differently disgusting to each other, but in terms of the vomit draft, the thing of getting somebody to write it in the first place so that they can then shape it into the thing it's actually going to be is what that's reminding me of, that there is an early stage where I think that what you're saying feels like such a good reminder to me that it's not supposed to be clear, it's not supposed to be easy, it's not even at times supposed to be fun and silky and beautiful. It's just in order that it's going to be, it has to look like this now so that it can gradually get to that stage that you're talking about where you are making it beautiful and you can see the home stretch ahead of you.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be good. Giving yourself permission to not be good is brilliant. Oh, this is terrible. Yeah, but you're still writing it, so that's good. It'll be good later. Let it be good later.
Let it be good later.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other rituals or habits or exercises that you would recommend to the future writers out there who are just working out how to be their own version of weird or strange?
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I think it's quite a good idea. I would say this, but I really like just paper and pen. So just being a longhand doodler. And if you fill up the page with doodles, that's great too. I think that has a different relationship to your brain to being in front of a screen. Sometimes screens are very demanding.
The delete key is a lot easier on a screen as well, isn't it?
Yes, that's true.
You can't cross out and look back.
But you're so right. But actually, quite a lot of things that I have crossed through with like vast sweeping with my pen, I've then had to go back and shamefacedly to sort of look around the cross through. So yeah, it's worth creating things that you still have, even if you've crossed through it a few times. Yeah.
Curious about the notebook and the doodling. So if you look back over a notebook, is there sort of massive great doodle and a bit of novel and story?
Yeah. Usually I write right on the right-hand side. That's my actual draft. And then the left-hand side is just notes and doodles. So I can just put, this is rubbish. I can usually click through it and see this is rubbish written a lot on the left because I know it's not good enough yet. But that's okay. I've just expressed it on that side of the page. Then I can get on with doing what I'm doing. Yeah, doodles for sure. It's really brilliant to just have that blank space next to it. And then later on, if you think, I need to add something, you can write that there, cross out as you go along. Yeah.
The reason I'm finding that so exciting is a conversation that I was having with a couple of people, some fiction, some memoir, is people who are moving from, Rachel, here are the reasons I don't have any time to write the book and there's absolutely no other way that this could have been this week. I just don't have any time to write the book. Will then, over the next week, move to, I'm finding it really hard to write the book. And that's great because that's moving in the direction of I'm spending time with why I'm not writing it, to I'm spending time with acknowledging it's more difficult than maybe I thought.
Yeah,
and then gradually it becomes habits. But the thing that I see in that process is around that table, that mental table, there is the critic and there is the artist, and they're sitting there and they both need things. But what your notebook is doing seems to me a really beautiful way of having that dialogue, that you are writing the book, but you're also leaving notes to yourself in a number of forms, some of them literal notes, some of them doodles. But you're having that conversation with yourself. You're doing the art, but you're also doing the craft. You're also doing the conversations in your head.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that, but you're right. In a way, it's giving space for the critic and the artist to exist in the same space, because sometimes, the advice is to bury the critic on the first draft, but actually that doesn't really work for me. The critic's still there, like all the other voices on the bus. So I'm going to leave a space for them to do what they're doing. Then the artist could kind of, drive the bus, but the critic's still a noted and valuable passenger, even if all they're shouting is, this is rubbish from the back seat. That's okay.
Yeah. Because they've got their space to shout whatever they want.
Yeah.
And it's not stopping you doing this. Oh, that's such a beautiful way of looking at it, because it reminds me of my favourite game is Excuses Bingo, and I've talked to a couple of people about this on this series, where all of the things that a head can potentially shout at itself, like, what if it's too boring? What if it's too weird? Usually within the same second.
Yeah.
My dad would hate this, or that's not how so-and-so would see this, or I couldn't possibly mix this bit of memory with this imagination. And we do our positive opposites to that, and we do our time notes. Like my brain yelled that to me at 11 o'clock yesterday, and look, who knew, it's doing it exactly the same time today. And it allows you to, I'm hoping that's going in a book proposal at the moment, but excuses bingo, because it's the brain.
That's a really good way of looking at it.
Thank you. It's the brain keeping us in the status quo of the not having written. Yeah. And I think what I so love about talking to you is that you do seem to have the sense of fun that means that they can shout all of that stuff, but you're still going, well, yeah, whatever. The point is, I'm having a good fun. This is my story.
Yeah.
And it's an important relationship. It does sort of maybe get around some of that, or is it still just a shouty?
Yeah, it's still, they all still shout, but I think over time I've learned that you don't have to be afraid of the shouting. It doesn't mean anything particularly. You're not at the stage where you're showing it to anybody, and then later on, you're not at the stage where, it's about to be published tomorrow or whatever. So there's like this idea of, I know you're all worried about all of these things, but it's okay. I'm just doing this. I'm just gonna write this, and then later on we'll worry about all the other stuff. But
trust in the moment,
stages. The moment never really comes to worry about it properly, because before you know it, it's out there, and by that point you're watching the next book. So you're not really interested anymore in whatever it was in that book that, felt so intensely needing to be worried about. Mm-hmm. They're not, I don't say they're not real, these voices, because they are very real and they're very important. But they just need their space. They don't need you to sacrifice everything to them.
It's when I was doing my excuses bingo, the sort of the shouty voice, I sometimes describe it as being a bit like a small child or a cat, whatever. They want attention. And all they really need, they don't need you to believe what they're saying. They just need you to go, I hear you. I understand you're trying to help me. Here is a very comfortable seat next to my keyboard while I get the hell on with this.
Yes. Yeah, that exactly. I have a dog, so I tend to think of it as my barking dog. He's kind of, he's going to make noises. But, dogs do. That doesn't mean we instantly should respond to whatever they do, because that's not very helpful either, because then everybody's just barking, which is just noise.
And otherwise.
Yeah.
Regarding said dog.
Yeah.
The emotional blackmail that certain writers I know feel they experience about, or worry that if there is a dog, they won't get any writing done, or if, the sort of, how do you handle it? Is it just office door shut means office door shut, ignore the barking? How does it work?
Honestly, I don't think I have like a set way of looking at it. I think maybe this ties back into the idea of beginner's mind as well, is that I've tried really hard not to put certain strictures or ideas kind of down to a point where they get really set or solid. So on a day-to-day basis, I just kind of deal with it all as best I can, I think. Yeah.
And is there a boundary involved? For example, if you need to be writing and the dog is saying, me, is there a way of going, I will be back? I mean, I had a cat, so it was easier. He wasn't a roller on keyboards. He was... I did once balance the keyboard on him, and he was actually quite happy with that. He was my table for a little bit.
Yeah, with my dog, he's a Labrador, and he's usually incredibly good. But he does have this thing sometimes where if you're typing away, they're kind of like, oh, but you just sat there. You're not really doing anything. And you have hands. So really, what you should be doing is, petting me.
Yeah.
And my very heavy head should be here on your hands, on both your hands at the same time. So, and I can't say no to him. He's too adorable for that.
So you must somehow structure the day so that it's I think that's what I find so fascinating, is that's I can't say no to him. But at some point you seem to have found a way that you can, or we wouldn't be having this conversation.
That is true. Yes, I don't just do that 24/7. He sleeps sometimes and then I can type. No, as you say, there are moments where you just have to say, you're lovely. Now here's your ball with some treats in. I do love my treat ball. So, you fill that with treats and off he goes. So that's good.
Yeah. And I guess we have to do the same to ourselves as well. I don't know how it is for you, but there have certainly been times for me where creative confidence, as in whether that's on the page, what am I trying to create here, or whether that's in my life, what do I want to create in my life so that I can do the things that I'm doing. There have been times and there have been days where that is easier or feels more natural and real than others. And there are times when I've sort of had to drive it on manual, as in it's not coming naturally and I have to get myself back into it. Is there anything you'd say to people who are struggling to find that focus or that creative confidence?
I think we talked about it already in a way, which is the kind of saying it's okay to just write for 3 minutes. It's okay to just write for the length of time that you would do something else. It would take this long to boil a kettle and make a cup of tea. Well, in that case, I will actually just sit here and write for that period of time. I don't think it really matters how small it is, because there's something that triggers in the brain for just giving yourself permission to do that, even. So yeah, it's about finding the moments. I don't think it's very helpful to get into a situation where you're kind of butting up against the idea of I must have more time. I'm being given more time, and then you're in this direct confrontation all the time with yourself, and then you start losing out by the idea of I should do this. I should make more time for this. I should be doing things that I'm not. Is just really destructive to creativity anyway, because then you're just thinking about how you're a terrible person all the time rather than making up great stuff and just going free with it.
I wrote a piece about permission recently called Shooting the Should Fairies.
Yes. Oh, I hate I should. Yeah.
And I know you and I have talked about that before, but it's so lovely to hear people who know how to recognise when their brains are shoulding at them and instead go back to what I want and find that curiosity and find that permission. It's just so lovely. Yeah,
thanks. It's a great subject, to kind of write about. It's good to hear that, we're sort of saying to people, it's okay. Don't should yourself so much. It's okay.
It's okay. And that curiosity, wherever it goes.
Yeah.
It's the answer worth having, isn't it?
Definitely. It's its own reward.
Sorry, go on.
It's its own reward. It absolutely is.
It is its own reward. I will say I also have emergency work chocolate, which is another kind of reward.
Wow, I have that as well. Yeah, that works. I have emergency chocolate buttons. I thought that was just, it's nice to hear we've got another emergency chocolate person.
I have emergency work chocolate where it needs to be when nobody else knows where it is, because sometimes those emergencies exist.
This is true. No, you are absolutely right.
I'm very glad to hear that it's there with you as well. Is there any sort of what's coming next or where you'd like to direct people to come and find you at the moment?
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so I've got a website and I'm updating that sort of regularly with where I am and what's happening. So you mentioned City of All Seasons. So that's the book I collaboratively wrote with Oliver Langmead, and that's out in spring. So that's quite exciting. And that was a really brilliant experience, because I think a lot of the time, talking about beginner's mind and things like that, we kind of think, oh, we don't really know what we're doing. We're just making it up as we go along. Why, I certainly do. And then when it came to doing it collaboratively with somebody else, you actually realise, oh, I know a lot of stuff. I'm quite good at this. It was really amazing to realise that it is a craft and you have learnt it and you can apply it and use it in different ways to create a world, with another writer. So I really recommend writing collaboratively with somebody just to see, how that feels. I thought that was an amazing experience. So that's coming up. Back at 381 is out next week. So I don't know when that'll be in terms of when this goes out, but
do you want to say the website? Do you want to say the website?
The website's aliyawhiteley.com. So it's, the details will be on there. And, I've got a novella coming out with Yukon Press, the creator, at some point this year, which is my homage to 1950s horror movies. So I loved writing that. Yeah.
Aliya Whiteley, thank you so much for joining the Writers' Gym.
Thank you for letting me come along and just splurge at you, really. So that was loads of fun.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr. Rachel Knightley.
Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London, as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.